The medical bay of the celestial horizon fell into stunned silence as the scanning device completed its analysis, and the results appeared on the holographic display, and the lead physician of the Vorath species stared at the readings with awe, four of her eyes widening in disbelief, and her translator device chirped frantically as she tried to process what she was seeing. And beside her stood two junior medics who were equally frozen in shock. The human female lying on the examination table continued to smile despite the grotesque angle of her left arm and the deep gash across her forehead that was still oozing crimson blood. And her name was Katie Brooks, and she had just survived what should have been an absolutely fatal shuttle crash on the mining colony of Epsilon 7, and the Vorath medical team had responded to the distress call expecting to retrieve bodies. Not survivors. Dr. Zalara finally found her voice, and her translator converted her clicks and whistles into standard galactic speech, and she said, "We are detecting 17 distinct bone fractures throughout your skeletal structure, and your left radius and ulna are completely severed, and you have 3 cracked ribs, and your collarbone is broken in 2 places, and there is significant trauma to your skull. And by all our medical understanding, you should be unconscious or dead from shock alone." Katie shifted slightly on the table and winced, but her grin never faltered, and she replied, "Yeah, I figured it was something like that, and it hurts pretty bad. But honestly, this is not even close to the worst I have been through." And the medics exchanged bewildered glances, and their head tendrils twitching in agitation. The younger medic named Praxis stepped forward, and his voice carried a mixture of concern and confusion, and he asked, "How are you even conscious? And the pain readings we are receiving from your neural system should have overwhelmed your brain function, and most species would have died from the trauma response alone. And yet you are talking and even displaying what appears to be amusement." Katie laughed, and then immediately regretted it as pain shot through her broken ribs, and she gasped and said, "Sorry. That was dumb, but look, you guys seem really worried, and I appreciate that. But humans are built different, and we can take a lot of punishment. And this reminds me of the time I fell off a cliff during a hiking trip back on Earth, and broke both my legs, and punctured a lung, and I still managed to crawl 3 miles to the nearest ranger station." Dr. Zalara felt her heart skip a beat, and she had studied dozens of species across the galaxy, and she considered herself an expert in xenobiology. But humans continued to defy every logical expectation, and she activated the bone knitting device and began the process of stabilizing Katie's arm, and she said, "We need to understand this, and your species' pain tolerance is beyond anything in our medical databases, and you have sustained injuries that would kill a Vorath in minutes, yet you display humor." Katie watched the alien technology begin to work on her bones, and the sensation was strange but not unpleasant. And she said, "Well, we did not evolve on an easy planet, and Earth tried to kill us in about 1,000,000 different ways, so our bodies adapted, and we heal fast, and we can handle extreme pain, and we are stubborn as hell, and honestly, that last part might be the most important." Praxis was scanning Katie's cellular structure, and his device showed something remarkable, and he said, "Doctor, look at this," and her immune system is already responding to the injuries, and her white blood cell count is elevated by 300%, and her body is flooding the damaged areas with healing factors, and I have never seen such an aggressive biological response. The third medic, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, and her name was Thyra, and she asked, "What is this substance flowing through your system?" And our sensors detect high levels of what you call adrenaline, and this chemical is acting as both a painkiller and a stimulant. And is this normal? Katie nodded and said, "Yeah. When humans get hurt or scared or need to fight, our bodies dump adrenaline into our bloodstream, and it makes us stronger and faster, and it dulls pain. And back in ancient times, it helped our ancestors fight off predators or run away from danger, and now it just helps us deal with situations like this, and honestly, I am probably going to crash hard once it wears off, but for now I am." Good. Dr. Zalara continued working on Katie's injuries, and the bone knitter was making progress, but it would take hours to fully repair all 17 fractures. And she said, "We are fascinated and disturbed in equal measure. And in Vorath culture, we avoid pain at all costs, and our society has developed technology to prevent injury before it occurs, and we cannot imagine willingly enduring what you are experiencing." Katie's expression softened, and she said, "I get that, and different species, different priorities, but humans kind of thrive on challenges, and we push ourselves, and we test our limits, and sometimes we break, but we always put ourselves back together, and that is just who we are. And also I did not exactly plan to crash a shuttle today, so this was not voluntary. The medical bay's main door opened, and Commander Lisa Hayes entered, and she was the human liaison officer for the Joint Coalition Fleet. And she had been notified of the accident, and she took one look at Katie on the table and shook her head, and she said, "Brooks, what did you do this time?" Katie grinned sheepishly and said, "Hey, Commander, and just had a little disagreement with gravity, and nothing serious." Lisa turned to Dr. Zalara and asked, "How bad is it?" The Vorath physician gestured at the holographic display showing the full extent of Katie's injuries, and she said, "By our medical standards, this human should not be alive, and she has 17 broken bones and significant soft tissue damage and head trauma, and yet she has remained conscious and communicative throughout the examination, and we are at a loss to explain her resilience." Lisa nodded as if this was completely expected, and she said, "Yeah, that sounds about right. And humans are hard to kill, and we have a saying back home that whatever does not kill you makes you stronger. And these idiots take it literally." And she looked at Katie with a mixture of exasperation and pride. Katie said, "Hey, I resent that, and I am a highly trained pilot, and accidents happen." Lisa replied, "You crashed into a mountain." Katie countered, "The mountain got in my way." The two junior medics watched this exchange with growing confusion, and Praxis whispered to Thyra, "Do they not understand the severity of this situation, and this human could have died?" Thyra whispered back, "I think they understand perfectly, and I think this is simply how humans process trauma, and through humor and defiance, and it is both impressive and terrifying." Dr. Zalara finished the initial stabilization, and she said, "We will need to keep you here for at least 3 planetary rotations, and your bones need time to fully knit, and you need rest and nutrition, and observation." And she paused and then added, "And I suspect you will ignore our recommendations and attempt to return to duty." Early Katie laughed again, and this time managed not to hurt herself, and she said, "You are learning, Doctor, and you are definitely learning over the next few hours as the medical team worked to repair Katie's extensive injuries. They learned more about human physiology than they had in years of study, and they discovered that humans produced natural opioids to manage pain, and that human bones were surprisingly dense and strong, despite their ability to break, and that the human healing process was remarkably efficient." Dr. Zalara found herself developing a grudging respect for these strange, resilient creatures, and she said to Katie as she worked, "I must admit, when humans first joined the coalition, we Vorath were skeptical, and you seemed fragile and short-lived and prone to injury, but we were wrong, and you are perhaps the most durable species we have encountered." Katie smiled and said, "Thanks, Doc, and that means a lot, and hey, maybe next time I crash, I will aim for something softer than a mountain." Lisa, who had remained in the medical bay, replied, "There had better not be a next time." Brooks, Katie said, "No promises, Commander." As the bone knitter completed its work on the 17th and final fracture, Dr. Zalara stepped back and reviewed the results, and Katie's bones were now stronger than before thanks to the advanced Vorath technology, and her soft tissue injuries were healing rapidly, and within a week she would be fully recovered. The doctor said, "You may go, but you must return for follow-up examinations, and your species continues to surprise us." Katie sat up slowly and tested her newly repaired arm, and she said, "Thanks for putting me back together, Doc, and I really appreciate it. And if it makes you feel any better, I am definitely feeling this now, and the adrenaline is wearing off." Dr. Zalara noticed the way Katie's smile had become slightly strained and the way she moved more carefully, and she said, "The pain is returning." Katie nodded and said, "Yeah, but I will be fine, and humans are good at dealing with pain, and we have practice." As Katie left the medical bay, with Commander Lisa supporting her, Dr. Zalara turned to her team and she said, "Make detailed notes of everything we observed today, and this information will be valuable for treating humans in the future, and they are going to need it. Because I suspect this will not be the last time we see injuries like this." Praxis asked, "Do you think all humans are like this?" Dr. Zalara considered the question and she said, "Based on what we have learned, I believe they are, and they are survivors and warriors and explorers who refuse to acknowledge limits, and they will push forward no matter the cost, and we are fortunate they are our." Thyra added, "and terrified to imagine them as enemies."